David never thought about his energy. Not in the way people talked about it online. Not in the vibes, aura, or presence kind of way. To him, life was simple: work hard, stay quiet, don't get in the way, and hope things eventually improve. He lived in a small apartment in Houston, Texas, the kind where the walls were thin enough to hear arguments next door and the air conditioning barely kept up with the heat. His mornings were predictable: wake up late, rush through a shower, grab whatever food was quickest, and head to work already feeling behind. He worked at a logistics warehouse. Nothing glamorous. Long shifts, repetitive tasks, loud machinery, and people who came and went like seasons. But there was something about David people couldn't explain. They didn't dislike him, but they didn't gravitate toward him either. When he walked into a room, no one turned their head. Conversations didn't pause. Opportunities didn't shift toward him. He blended in so well, it was almost like he disappeared. And that was his first problem, though he didn't know it yet. Invisible, even in a crowd. One Monday morning, David walked into the warehouse 10 minutes late. Again, no one said anything directly. But his supervisor, Mark, glanced at him for half a second longer than usual. Not angry, just unimpressed. David felt it. That small, silent judgment. He kept his head down, clocked in, and got to work. Later that day, a new guy named Eric joined the team. Eric wasn't more skilled. He didn't know the system. He asked basic questions. Made small mistakes. But something was different. Within an hour, people were talking to him. Laughing with him. Showing him shortcuts no one had ever shown David. By the end of the shift, Mark had already mentioned Eric as someone with potential. David heard that. And something inside him tightened. How, he thought. He just got here. But the answer wasn't in what Eric was doing. It was in what he was carrying. The weight you can't see. David went home that night and sat in silence. No TV. No music. Just his thoughts. He replayed the day over and over again. Same job. Same environment. Same opportunities. Different outcomes. That's when something uncomfortable surfaced. David didn't walk into rooms. He dragged himself into them. His posture was slightly slouched. His movements hesitant. His eyes avoided direct contact. His energy, if you could call it that, felt like someone already defeated before the day even began. And people felt it. Not consciously. Not deliberately. But humans are wired to read energy faster than words. Before David ever spoke, people had already decided, he's unsure. He's low confidence. He's not someone to rely on. And just like that, doors quietly stayed closed. A small moment that changed everything. A few days later, something unexpected happened. David was assigned to help unload a shipment with an older worker named Marcus. Marcus had been at the warehouse for over 15 years. Quiet, observant, and the kind of person who didn't waste words. They worked in silence for about an hour. Then Marcus spoke. "You ever notice how people treat you?" David paused. "What do you mean?" Marcus didn't look at him. Just kept working. "They don't take you serious." The words hit harder than they should have. David felt defensive. "I do my job." Marcus nodded slightly. "I didn't say you don't." Silence again. Then. "But your energy says you don't believe in yourself." That sentence stayed in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. The mirror he didn't want. That night, David stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not fixing his hair. Not adjusting his clothes. Just, looking. And for the first time, he didn't look away quickly. He saw it. The tired eyes. The slight slump in his shoulders. The expression that looked like he was apologizing just for existing. It wasn't about looks. It was about presence. He realized something difficult: he had spent years trying not to stand out. Trying not to be judged. Trying not to fail. And in doing so, he erased himself. Energy is a language. The next morning, nothing in David's life had changed. Same apartment. Same job. Same problems. But he made one small decision: he would walk differently. That's it. No big transformation. No dramatic speech. Just, walk like he belonged. When he entered the warehouse, it felt unnatural. His mind kept telling him, this isn't you. But he kept going. He stood a little straighter. Made eye contact, brief, but intentional. Moved with purpose, even when he didn't feel it. Something subtle shifted. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But enough. A coworker who usually ignored him nodded. Another asked a simple question instead of bypassing him. Small things. But real. The resistance within. Change isn't loud. It's uncomfortable. By the third day, David felt exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Holding that presence required effort. His old habits pulled at him: relax. Go back to normal. Why are you pretending? No one cares anyway. But Marcus's words stayed with him: your energy says you don't believe in yourself. David realized something critical: energy isn't about mood. It's about identity. And his identity had been built around staying small. The first real test. A week later, an opportunity came up. Mark needed someone to assist with inventory tracking, something slightly more responsible, slightly more visible. Normally, David wouldn't even consider it. He would assume someone else was better. More confident. More capable. But this time, he hesitated, then stepped forward. I can help with that. The words felt foreign. Mark looked at him, really looked this time. Not dismissive. Not impressed. Just, evaluating. All right, he said. Let's see. That was it. No applause. No big moment. But for David, it was everything. Because for the first time, his energy spoke before his doubt could silence him. Becoming noticeable. Over the next few weeks, nothing magical happened. David didn't become the best worker overnight. He still made mistakes. Still felt unsure sometimes. But something was different. People started noticing him. Not because he was louder. But because he was present. His movements had intention. His voice, when he used it, carried weight. His energy no longer asked for permission, it simply existed. And that changed everything. The truth he learned too late, but just in time. One evening, Marcus caught him again. You look different, Marcus said. David smirked slightly. I feel different. Marcus nodded. That's how it starts. David thought for a moment, then asked, so, it really was just energy? Marcus shook his head. No. He paused. It was belief. Energy is just how belief shows up before you say a word. David didn't realize how much harder it would get once people started noticing him. At first, being seen felt like progress. People greeted him, asked for help, included him in conversations that once moved right past him. But attention came with something he hadn't prepared for: expectation. Now when he walked into the warehouse each morning, it wasn't just another day. It felt like something to maintain. Like he had to prove that the version of himself he had shown recently was real. And that pressure slowly started to build. One afternoon, he made a small mistake while tracking inventory. It wasn't serious, but it caused a delay. Mark didn't raise his voice. He just looked at David and said, I expected better. That was enough. Those 3 words followed him long after the shift ended. On the way home. While sitting alone in his apartment. even when he tried to distract himself. The doubt came back stronger this time. See? That's the real you. You're not built for this. You just got lucky before. The worst part wasn't the mistake, it was how quickly his mind used it as proof that he didn't belong in the version of himself he was becoming. The next morning, he felt the shift before he even left his apartment. His shoulders weren't as steady. His steps didn't carry the same intention. He caught himself avoiding eye contact again, just slightly, but enough to notice. And that's when it hit him, this wasn't about becoming someone new once. It was about choosing that version of himself every single day, especially when it felt unnatural. At work, things felt different again. Not like before when he was invisible, but not like the progress he had made either. It was like he was drifting in between. People weren't leaning toward him the same way. Conversations didn't hold him as long. Nothing obvious, but enough for him to feel it. He understood something in that moment most people never fully grasp: energy isn't fixed. It fluctuates based on what you allow internally. Later that day, Theo found him again. "You're in your head," Theo said without hesitation. David let out a quiet breath. "I messed up." Theo nodded once. And now it feels like everything's slipping," David admitted. Theo studied him for a second, then said, "You built your confidence on things going right." David didn't respond. "Real presence," Theo continued, "shows up strongest when things go wrong." That stayed with him. Because he knew it was true. His energy before had been tied to feeling in control. To things working out. To people responding well. But now he had to learn something deeper, how to stay grounded even when he didn't feel confident. So the next few days, he stopped trying to be impressive. He focused on being steady. When something went wrong, he didn't shrink back. He fixed it. When someone questioned him, he didn't avoid it. He answered directly. When stress built up, he didn't rush to escape it. He stayed present in it. It felt slower. Less dramatic. But stronger. And gradually, people started responding differently again. Not with excitement, but with trust. That was new. Trust didn't come from being perfect. It came from being consistent. Weeks passed, and another opportunity came. Bigger this time. Mark needed someone to handle a section during a busy shift. It meant more responsibility, more pressure, more visibility. David felt the fear immediately, but it didn't stop him. This time, he didn't ask himself if he was ready, he asked himself how he would show up. So he stepped forward and said, "I can take it." No hesitation. No overthinking. Just presence. The shift was messy. Delays, confusion, small conflicts between workers. Nothing went exactly as planned. But David didn't fall apart. He stayed calm. Gave clear directions. Listened when needed. Adjusted when things didn't work. He didn't try to control everything. He just didn't lose control of himself. By the end of the shift, things weren't perfect, but they were handled. And that was enough. One of the workers, someone who barely spoke to him before, tapped his shoulder and said, "You handled that well." Simple words. But they meant more than recognition. They meant his energy held under pressure. That night, sitting in his apartment, David thought about how much had changed. Not his surroundings. Not his job. Just him. He understood now that energy isn't about being loud, confident, or impressive. It's about the signal you send without trying. The way you carry yourself when no one is watching. The way you respond when things don't go your way. The way you stay present instead of shrinking back. A few days later, a new worker walked into the warehouse. Quiet. Hesitant. Trying not to stand out. David recognized it instantly. It was the same energy he used to carry. For a moment, he almost ignored it. But then he didn't. He walked over and said, first day? The guy nodded. David gave a small, steady smile. Stay with me. I'll help you get started. And in that moment, without trying to prove anything, David became someone whose energy spoke before he even did.